thought someone else was here. I didn't see anyone, and then maybe I had the wrong day. I hear this couple, you know. That's my mom.
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, I mean, you think we should have it?
No, we just shut it down.
You did just shut it down. Did someone do something naughty?
Lots of people, lots of things. Mostly around, we were making changes for the bell restrictions. Makes sense. Revamp. What I'm presenting.
Yes, how ironic. Complaining about. How's the transition going?
Well,
Look forward to hearing. Good to see you. Here, congratulations. The start.
Now just make it to the finish.
Oh, I know. Where's up, fighting in your, a month ago? And how pretty they got, is that your family? Do you have a road up in? Is your family from that area originally? Yeah. I'm guessing it's one of your.
Could be there, my grandparents had 12 children.
Yeah. Just having someone else.
we will be here, so. All right, we call our meeting to order. 6:37. We get an agenda review. We do need to add the agenda. Just in case to get us days, so why don't we add that to the first item? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You suffered through the whole meeting last. Sure. See, you can see that here. All right, anyone else have anything to add to the agenda? No, okay. Any public questions or input? Actually, I'm not online yet. Should get back to, one minute, but I think I'm,
One, you, another reminder that
Oh,
wasn't sure if you had joined from here.
no, no.
Participant.
it's in the, where you find this in.
Morning and.
Okay, so that, all right, if there's no questions or answers from the public, we got PTO report. And I'm assuming we will not have a PTO report tonight. Okay, with that.
Thank you. It'll be Al picking me up if I'm here.
I think so, or maybe, can you guys,
Like scoot your chair forward, maybe?
Yeah. I don't wanna.
it's a little awkward because you're back to, obviously. So is back Rebecca Holden is here, obviously one of our legislators. She graciously volunteered to give us an update, particularly on the committee, redistricting committee, and anything else that we should be aware of. And when you read our notes that we have for the budget guidelines, you'll see that we talked a lot about what's coming up at the state level as we talked about our budget guidelines last Tuesday in our budget meeting. So
Great.
over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I know it's been an amazing tomato season here, but I'm very glad you got them all at home. So thank you very much. I would be remiss if I didn't start with congratulations. And thank you to me for all the amazing work, and so excited to have the good work continue. So I'm really excited about that. And thank you for taking care of our kids. Most important thing that's why we're all here. I want to first, I'm gonna not to talk too much. I'm not gonna go through the bill because you know, I'm not gonna go through all the work, the redistricting task force, because I think I just want to talk about the things you might want to look at as you move forward. But I wanted to just make sure everybody is aware of a couple changes implied in Act 44 that were Act 73, formerly H454, that will affect Norwich and will affect Norwich pretty hard. The first is when they did go through, even before Act 454, there was a change in that the state used almost 120 million to buy down tax rates on budgets last year after people had voted on the budgets. That means, and I'm sure you've noticed this already in your budget process, what I'm starting to hear statewide is people are seeing what they anticipate will be a pretty significant jump in tax rates associated with that episodic use of one-time money at the state. So I apologize. I actually voted against this with about 3 other people because we were hoping this surplus, one-time money, could have been used for permanent cost containment to smooth increases and slow the curve permanently. And instead, we chose to put it into tax abatement on a budget that people had already voted for, setting you up this year. I think it's terrible policy. I will continue to advocate against it. And I'm sorry that your first act of this budget is to start to anticipate that. I wanted to also put on your radar that there's a change coming through the homestead exemptions. And on the one hand, it should increase the amount of revenue available on paper to people whose household income is 115 and below. You think about whose household income is in that range and also who's just over that range. These are often families, single parents, or they're people with two working parents, maybe working full-time as a PT and as a carpenter. Danger zone. But given the recent evaluations that have come out, I think we also all need to be mindful that that is capped to a certain amount of property. And as the baseline values continue to escalate with no apparent relation to gravity, people are going to find that even if they are technically eligible activity on the first portion of it so increased that they're still feeling a pretty big hit in that. So I want to say that because people often say, oh, Norwich can afford it. But you know, and I know that there are many people who are really concerned right now, not just because of the changes in the tax law, changes in underlying property values and homestead exemption. And I feel like I need to say that because we do have a cost of living challenge. It's why we're losing, in particularly people who are earning between about 50 and 150 a year. Those folks are just leaving because they're saying we can't afford to buy in and we can't afford to pay our taxes if we do. And so as a state, if we want a vibrant future, we need to be thinking about where people can, I will just acknowledge because we are a high spending community, but we just acknowledge this is a school board that made a commitment to the idea that the people who work and teach and care for our kids are the people who can afford to live in our community. And so this is a place where your values are going to be really important, but they're going to be really tested as the state makes some of the changes ahead of you. So I want to acknowledge the careful work you've done. And I also want to acknowledge the state is not making it easy for you right now. I also am firmly believe that if we have a spending problem, it can't be solved with the tax formula. It's a spending problem. And, advocated quite strenuously, put some language that I thought would have targeted the underlying drivers of cost. And some of the biggest drivers are social support services. Vermont districts spend about $2,000 more per kid on support services than do districts in New Hampshire or New York or Massachusetts. That's very clear. It has been true for years. Our schools serve a different role than schools in other states. That's coming off the property tax, which is a slightly more regressive tax base. And it's just something that we can't change our funding formula out of that particular problem. So this is a tough moment. I think Neil invited me to come and talk about today was the redistricting task force, which is part of this larger bill. We know that the big drivers of cost are healthcare and related services. We know that a big part of the budget this year in the budgets was actually construction because several districts have managed to pass fund, and that cost in our education fund is shared across the systems. That's a piece of that upward tick as well. We know that it's increases in support services. Our expenditures on support are almost twice the rate of our expenditures on instruction as a state. And so when you're talking about higher cost and lower performance, it's because we are using our schools as a safety net of last resort. But what we aren't doing is putting that emphasis on improving teaching and learning, which is what you're about. So that's sort of what you're trying to navigate through is how do you maintain your commitment to your community and navigate some of the chaos and the instability of the state level. That's what it is. And it's going to get more chaotic and more unstable potentially because of what we're seeing. And we know that if there's Medicaid, some people say don't say might be, say it will, not this year, but after the next election, of course. You can imagine why. We could see some pretty significant challenges that we're going to address. We also know that the agency, which has been unable to provide us any data, and what the funding sources of the positions is potentially in line to lose a significant number of staff in federally funded positions. And the only way we meet our state obligations at this point is by dual purposing those federal restrictions to meet state law. Medicaid, Medicaid, school-based Medicaid, that's actually going to clean out the positions at the agency and at the health, because those positions are funded through school-based Medicaid. So there's a lot going on, and it's easy to be overwhelmed. And what I'm going to tell you is this is the time to take a deep breath. And what is it that your kids need, and how do you try to keep driving that direction, despite what feels like a lot of noise at the state level? And I say that because there's a lot of very ambitious stuff, and in his press conference, Phil Scott was saying the redistricting task force needs to forget about the data, they just need to do their job and draw the line. But drawing the lines is not, that's actually easy. I can draw a map right now, okay, give it to you. In actually drawing a map that makes sense and actually makes kids better off and makes communities better, really hard. And it is super hard when the agency cannot even provide ADM counts for districts. And thank you to Neil and to the office of the president that was able to confirm that indeed the count of students enrolled at Marion Cross was off by 10%. Especially when you're 10% is bigger than some schools. So we need to take a deep breath. We need to just keep pushing on what are we trying to achieve for our kids? Where are the opportunities to look for scale of partnerships in ways that actually could leave kids in Vermont and our communities better off? And what of this is just going to kind of fall apart when people think it doesn't make sense? And we just don't know right now. And there's about 150 off ramps built into this. You know, if you talk to the administration, it's a done deal. They just need the map, good to go. She said we had more staff, we had more experienced staff, and 6 was for the most part voluntary, and people had 2 years to develop and to get behind. This is not that. I don't think people have really thought through being asked. And as that becomes more and more obvious, people may start making strategic decisions. So I'm saying that because I'm hearing from other parts of the state, people talking about closing their schools so that they get choice, people doing this, people doing that. It's too early. You know, we all need to take a deep breath. Your school is a good school because you've got stable leadership that stayed here for years and has stayed focused on making it good for kids. That's what we need you to do as a school board, and it's what we need every single school in the state to do right now, as hard as it is. And my deep apologies, because it is not easy, and I've been hearing from educators all over the place about some of the challenges. So I want to honor that work and also say, I'm so sorry, we need to ask more, and that is we need you to stay focused on kids and provide the constructive input that helps us get to that effect. Because we do have critical cost concern. You know, one of the things the reason that was BOCES bill, which is Board of Collaborative Education Services, several years ago, is that we know that one of the biggest drivers of increased cost is around extraordinary expenses and extra staffing in special education. You may think your staffing is high because you have a 5-to-1 staffing to student to staffing ratio, but you are the highest ratio in the state right now, and more than twice as much. We have districts and supervisory units with ratios of 2-to-1. That's 2 kids per 1 adult who works in the system. And it's not in teachers, it's in support services and staff. So the more we can ask the agency of education, stop talking about plans we all know are never going to happen, and to start talking about the reality of where we are and what the data of how we can serve kids better. Because I'm going to tell you, putting a one-on-one aid on every kid is not actually serving that kid well. It is not the right thing to do. How do we help ourselves get to better levels, better kids, and also better taxpayers? Because they're out there. And you've done, Sean, you've done tremendous work in this district. So why, I don't know why you asked me to come, but what I want to tell you about the is we've decided no matter what they say about just draw the lines, because we're hearing it everywhere. We said, no, we can't draw the lines until we have a definition of the problem. Because we need to be able to come back to communities and say, we're shedding these lines because we actually think this is going to make things better, and here's why. We can't do that if we don't know to solve. And actually, Jay Adams is very important. We have some revisions around the share meeting. And so we have a definition of what it is we're trying to do, because it can't just be, we need bigger districts so we can have a new funding partner. Because we could fix 127, there's a pretty big problem. We could fix 173, there's some real problems with that too. We can't just keep changing because the old doesn't work. And then we're changing to something better. And so having that definition that Jay contributed to, hopefully, to some clarity. The other thing we insisted on was a goal. Just gonna drill math. If we don't know what are the goals we hope to achieve, and we can't plausibly explain how those changed math will actually lead to better quality, to better opportunity for kids, to equal opportunity for kids, to more affordability, because instead of, paying $150,000 for an out-of-district placement at a for-profit venture, we actually are doing in-house opportunities that are specialized settings that allow children to return to the classroom more quickly, but also frankly cost us very much, because that's what we're seeing statewide. We can do this, but it's not easy, and it's not as simple as trying to do that. So one thing I hope you can do is support in pushing back and trying to do this right, and not just do this fast. And I hope you also will use your voice. You're going to get communication from the VSBA about input into the hopper. And please do take the time to tell us what you expect from the state, because I think we're struggling from a bit of a lack of leadership, but you have the perspective locally to talk about communities that we can move forward. And I think to the extent that districts are providing that kind of careful, evidence-based thought feedback, then that's something we can lean on as we push back against hasty decisions that are being made really in the expediency of a funding change in the interest of children and communities. And I think there are many ways to solve every problem. My hope is that plausibly people in face here, but in every other district, and say, we're really trying to get ahead of that cost curve. So I don't want to talk any more on that unless you have specific questions, but do reach out. Did I not give you that?
One thing that's probably what everybody is thinking here, our status as part of the interstate school district, what is the likelihood that we are included in these redistricting discussions?
It's funny, we were talking about that today, and I have consulted with our legislative council. You should consult with your own legal counsel. Because the interstate is a fundamental entity, I don't think it's actually easy to do anything. And you may have noticed in the bill that there were some exceptions around the interstates. And there are two reasons for that. One is it's very unclear that these changes can be imposed on the interstate. And until we know what those districts are, it's actually very risky to tie the spending over the base to the lower grand list areas, which includes Rivendell. So there was some anxiety around that. I think the challenge is also, if they try to impose the funding formula, I don't think the cut can come from the other side, because that's a federal entity, you can't impose not law entity. So then the question is, are you at impasse? Is it the constitutional issue? Because if you try to make those cuts at the elementary level, Norwich actually can't meet its constitutional obligation to provide opportunities to its own kids. We're talking about the scale of the entire education budget at the elementary level. So my guess is that this is just one of the 700 offerings in this bill. I mean, it all comes until we get to the detail, but this is serious stuff. This is really serious stuff. I think it's careful decision. I did vote against this bill because I think it's sloppy. And I think if they don't have the answer to this, they have no business implementing it. But if it does look like there's some merger moving forward that leaves Norwich to the scale where it's so adversely impacted, or if there is a funding formula through that is denying you the ability to actually provide the children of the town, then I think you may have to keep on. And so I think this is one of the unanswered questions right now.
Yeah, and I think also complicated by the fact that we're not a K-12 interstate district.
You cannot emerge with that. because you have different structures, and you actually can't change it. You're a minority within the district, so it's not as if you could change it to the K-12 district if you wanted to.
It's just a little disappointing. We, potentially spend dollars on legal fees to be able to, justify maintaining our position because of state level action that's trying to potentially, undo it. So we're incurring costs because of that.
And the cost that you incur contributing to the distribution, right? Part, yeah, state level. I mean, again, I don't think that a funding program is the reason to redistrict the entire state. I think you have to redistrict based on educational objectives, which no one has been able to pay for yet. It's not that they're up there. We also contribute 127. The two big complaints I've heard. One is instability. But to me, the instability is from the episode. Like if you buy down 120 million, then of course you got it next year. So that's easy to fix. Just stop random use of one-time money. And the other is concern about, it is true that districts who may be given more tax, at least like that, they're always talked about, they proceed to continue to cut their budget. These are districts that I think on any objective measure are underspending on their kids. And an easy way to fix that would be to set the yearly goal of 1. And that's actually I'm trying to get because that would limit favor to reduce their budget and force them to spend. They're not spending enough to meet the needs of the kid. So you could fix that. The other thing that's incorrect in 127, the AIR study that was put together to adjust and recommend weights explicitly said that tuition students should not be weighted because there are no variable costs that they attend the fixed tuition. So effectively, we're overfunding every kid who goes to the academy or restricted private. Under the new formula, it's going to be funded based on the student weight, like the weight. But for the next couple of years, we are also funding districts that operate no public school as if they were struggling to operate small districts, which means that there are a couple towns with poverty rates that are similarly low to Norwich's, but they're subsidized as if they're struggling to operate school. If you think about that playing out over 5 years, first of all, it means they're under contributing, but it also means that they're going to hit a tax wall because if you shift to a new funding formula and you take out that benefit, there's a huge tax wall. Ironically, for districts like Norwich, which are probably challenged to spend, be penalized, the penalty is going to go to subsidize the districts in the transition. So there's just a lot of that objectively is really, really challenging for me to tolerate. Unfortunately, I mean, it's an interesting bill. It passed on the strength of Republican votes in the vote leadership. The majority of Democrats voted against it. Senate for whatever. But what that tells you is that there's a lot of people aren't sure this is headed.
I have 2 questions. The 120 million budget, what's that as a percentage of like total funds? It's a lot.
It's not much, but a rule of thumb is about every 11 million or so is about.
Okay. So if people end up with lower taxes because of that?
Lower
I mean,
tax.
it's hard for us to know that because we
Yes. It effectively
really
lowers the assessed tax rate compared to what people would have expected if they looked at the numbers that you presented.
And what did you say again? What was it?
A rule of thumb, it's not perfectly clean, you may have analyzed it, but it's about 11 million is about 1%.
And then you made a comment about Phillips Exeter. So I thought that when the whole private school thing in this latest act is only for
No,
that's kind of
it's out of state public school. It's funny, they count Dresden as an out of state public school. So you get it either way. You know? It's funny because then in the mapping tool, it means that using counted as part of the regional capacity. It's not one of the high schools that people can select when they're trying to map capacity.
People used to be able to send their kids that far to get paid for.
People have been, I mean, under the current, up until now, it's people in towns that closed their public schools and chose to pay vouchers were choosing to send. I mean, we have kids in London, we've got kids in Lutheran, kids going to a school in New York City. So people are different places. Those out-of-state private schools will not be able to receive tuition once this is fully done.
There was one other thing that just occurs to me through that conversation, right? It's to this board, but more likely in our role as members of the Dresden School District, if the redistricting task force comes up with a new model that excludes Dresden as a destination school, then the current tuition students that we're getting there may end up disappearing and going someplace else, which would cause, you know, a revenue issue on the Dresden side as well.
It's even more serious than that, in that you will have a revenue issue no matter what. Because if that funding formula goes into effect, because it will fundamentally cap
Right.
what you're allowed to charge tuition for a student who is not economically disadvantaged at about 15,000. So if you, which is significantly lower than the tuition. So you are talking about significant revenue shortfall in the foreseeable future if this bill moves forward.
Clarifying question, are you referring to students outside of Norwich who live in Vermont who are paying tuition to go to Hanover?
If you can still allows tuition to out-of-state schools. There are a couple of public schools along the Vermont border that serve significant numbers of students. And then Greenville School over near Berber takes a lot of public students over there. And then the White Mountain Regional High School, which is up in St. Jennifer and Linden, takes getting students as well. So there are parts of this, you know, the boundary states are certain significant numbers of Vermont students and still will. And in some of the cases, they, particularly in areas where people don't, you know, if they lose access to the school, they may actually not have access to school. The challenge.
Maybe one of the things I want to point out, because I know that you had mentioned before that we are high spending district. I don't disagree with that. I also want to put it in a little bit of context as well too, right? Especially when you take a look at what we're spending per student, which is the thing that sort of drives the tax rate, is that when 127 change in the student weights went in, our spending didn't change much. It was, I think, an average budget year of like maybe a 3 or 4% increase, but our student count, our equalized, our weighted student count changed dramatically. Right, and so from, we close school on a Friday, we open up on a Monday, same population walked through the door, but suddenly that cost per kid just escalated dramatically.
It's also distorted in the state records because they seem to treat Norwich students as if they're tuition students, but they're also allocating to the quote unquote tuition some of the management costs that would have been excluded from tuition and special ed costs. So that's.
Yeah. And then the other thing, I do know just from spending time to Norwich comes with a certain reputation. It's a wealthy town that, you know, can afford to spend a lot for their kids. But it occurs to me too in this last round of budgeting, if we just flip the view of that a little bit, we are, what I think I hear in a lot of education circles is what people want, right? All the things that have proven to be beneficial for education, low poverty, engaged parents, the appropriate amount spent in the right places, you know, what Sean has done by decreasing the number of ed assistants, but then bolstering that in the actual teacher population. Like we're doing all of the things that everybody in Vermont says makes a good school. And the results, I think, show that they're absolutely right. But the flip side is that the outside view from Montpelier and other places, when they look at a town like Norwich, is a different view. It's not one of success of like, look, if we do all the right things, then you get good outcomes.
I think that's right. I think it is also true, unfortunately, that there are some communities that have demonstrated through the votes that isn't the support education in those communities. And again, I mentioned
Mhm.
Act 127 increased their tax capacity, so they had to spend less to get more, and they still lowered what they had to spend. So there's a different dynamic there,
Mhm.
and the way to address that is different than what we do here. So you know, right now, that's why I'm looking at whether or not if you set the yield at one, that forces those districts to act the kids, because those kids do deserve change that we take for granted sometimes. And you do deserve it. So I think there are other ways to skin that cat. I think there's another piece of the bill I didn't mention. There is an effort to split the homestead, the non-homestead. You know, we can't just raise taxes on Danwich or Danwich. So we can't just bring them up to, but we can look at the and I've heard people tell me, people say to my face, I hope in Norwich is a hedge on the stock market because the return on their property there is greater than the return on the stock market. That's not okay when people are speculating on housing. These are the people who don't live here. And they can rent it out at homecoming, you know, graduation and parents weekend and pay the cost. Yeah, they're getting taxed at a rate that's something like 50 cents. And working 2 jobs and trying to stay here. So that is going to be broken, and that will allow for some change in how we spend those things. Because what's happened in some communities is that it becomes too expensive to live here. People leave, and when they leave, Woodstock, it's not the only, you know, we're over 50% is now second, right? And when they leave, you don't just, especially here when you're on the border with Illinois, you're not just losing the property tax that it falls to the lower rate. Right? And so you can talk about equity, but you lose the people paying the taxes. And so I think the conversations about what we're doing. And I appreciate that this board is consistent saying every kid deserves a fair chance, but figure out how to do it when the community to take care of its kids. And I'm not sure this, and you're not the only ones having the conversation.
Yeah.
Isn't a problem as well. They're very. There are allies, and part of it is helping us find land in a common sense place that allows us to focus and bring it down. But that doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Bradford is also upset. I work in the district up there and they are not happy with what's going on either. And people are worried, like they're seeing what's happening in Norwich and then Thetford. And then, yeah, looking that their assessed value of their homes is going up, not quite at the rate that Norwich is, but it's sort of the same thing is happening. People are being priced out of living there that have been there for a long time.
Which is, and that's another irony, I mean, that, you know, we have a housing emergency, and as a state, it would have been great if we prioritized the places with the greatest scarcity, which tends to be near job centers, including frankly the Upper Valley, because we actually, believe it or not, are near some of the highest job density in New England.
Yeah.
In Northern New England, but we are going to put out, making the rules now. I'm gonna try to remain optimistic, but we are going to allow districts to withhold up to 200 million a year total from the education fund, from the property tax, which is aggressive, and we already say is too high, to fund municipal investments that create, hopefully, development, and particularly development. So how that works with it actually serves the intended goal of the state is going to entirely depend on one of the concerns, and the auditor spoke to us, is why would you write rules so it doesn't make sense to develop when the state is funding it? And my concern is we have been too permissive, because then we would be paying for development. It wouldn't take place. And when you think about what makes sense, it's pipe, it's wastewater, it's water, because those are shared. And developers are happy to build, they just can't build. So there's a lot. That's another tax that
And then I just had a clarifying question. When you said to be in touch and to keep sending ideas to you, the legislative session doesn't start until January. So are you asking us to be in touch with the committee or to be in touch with the legislatures while they're out of session? Like, what's the best way? What are you looking for?
So two things, I mean, the VSBA is working, and one of my concerns is that input to the task force on.
Right.
Which has been the task force on lines, is that, the feedback won't be systematic, because just the people, we're getting a lot of right now. What would be helpful, instead of just saying what we don't want to do, people would also say what we should do.
Okay.
Because there are good things, and there's some amazing work going on around creating these boards of collaborative education and shared service model. There is the fastest growth is an extraordinary extent. It's increased like over 100% just a couple of years. There's a real problem there. It's because of the way the funding formula is written and because of the lack of district-based alternatives. That's a solvable. So to the extent that you can direct us to the solvable, we can try to elevate them. So we can get it. I get.
Okay.
If you guys, you can always reach out to me. I work for you. Always reach out to me.
Well, we work for you too.
Someone from the VSBA reaches out, please, they'll give you an email, and I can send it to them
Okay.
as well, or to Garrett. But please don't not, just because you can't be merged, or you think you can't be merged, don't not weigh in what we need to be doing as a state, because you are part of the state, we need you. And there's an email that you can send to, and I think we need to get.
Thank you.
One more question again.
Yeah, it's
School construction. Do we have any, clarification on where that might be headed? Because one of the things that we did recently, especially for the budget guidelines, started talking about all of the facilities improvements that we're looking at over the next, 5 to 15 years. And the numbers are a little scary, especially if we have to raise them back to just local.
Well, I think, I was extremely disappointed. I didn't expect especially once they had the amount people would spend on the foundation plan. I didn't expect a lot of money to be generated there. When it went through the House, it was, at least it would go to beginning to develop construction fund. What would I have done, 120 million? I would put it towards a construction fund. If you could do that, that would permanently reduce for everybody in the state, because it's a shared system. If you look at who's bonding now, it's certain districts that either have disproportionately benefited or kids. But Woodstock, you mentioned Woodstock, I mean, their building is so obsolete and has sued back. I mean, it's just criminal. And they'll never pass. And this bill would have directed it. In a conference committee, they chose to redirect construction. Cost reduction. So once again, we don't have a sort of construction fund. One of the things that you can point out is when it devolves, people are paying for their bond out of the regular education spending. They're actually cost shifting that to other districts. They can't do the same thing. And so we need to have an external construction money or use for that. I'm sorry, I mean, something I bought for the house and ended up getting taken out in conference committee.
Is
The
it-
priority
Is the redistricting task force looking at, the condition as you?
it is one of the
look at-
criteria that is there. One of the things that the task that it was given is they've asked us to do in 8 meetings. I'm just gonna be totally clear. This is not, we are in no position, the agency has not given us any meaningful data. And now we have just, 5 more meetings, and I don't, after this one, if we have data, I don't know how we're gonna do that. Because I don't think we can do is go attention to that. One of the things that we're supposed to do is, where regional high school might be seated and trying to figure out how we would locate them in sort of the population center of any district and target resources in that. But I don't know if we have no data. It's a serious problem. And it's not just here. 2 things I would say about that. We're still finding schools that are finding that they're contaminated with PCBs. I mean, Hartford is trying to decide now whether to start over. And there are regional conversations going around, from some districts south of that about whether they just need to bring in the regional high school instead of the Woodstock High School or Hartford School.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they need one high school and trying to figure out how to do that together at scale. I would also think one of the things that certainly about budgeting at the state level, to me, a deteriorated building is a liability. Right? It's just an unfunded liability to pay for. And so people are saying, well, I'm going to take on the cost of their bond. And I'm saying, yeah, and they don't want to take on you haven't maintained. I mean, it's sort of, you know, it goes both ways. And so I'm concerned people put numbers on it and know how they go. Emerson, we had, you know, we're probably better. Yeah.
Or Hartford.
Yeah, and Harvard. Yeah. So anyway, I'll have to bring you some.
Thanks.
We'll try to respond to every email I get. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate you get, you know, come and testify and, you know, voicing concerns. I think we just have to keep showing it and trying to leadership. Need to reach out if you think I'm missing something or I appreciate what you're doing. It's great to see kids delete their shit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We took care of that. Thanks, Rebecca.
We work in all the issues at a very deep level. I think we're all happy to see Jay also.
He's been great.
Very useful in putting his talents to good use there. And again, I would just summarize as we're going to get into our budget discussion tonight too, that, and I keep kind of reading this, and Neil says this too, as far as, I guess, a little bit of a reputation, but when you do look at Virginia and others who haven't been with us for very long, if you put all of our budgets for the past 10 years in a spreadsheet, which I've done, the average increase has always been like low single digits, right? At least here. And if you look at the number, you made the comment for Sean, if you look at the number of support staff, when I first was on the board, or a couple years before, I think it was in the high teens. And now we have a couple. And our budgets now, we're getting to a point where if we want to cut it, we either we have to cut a section, which means we're going to go from 3 sections to 2, which means the class size might go 15 to 25 or 30, right? Like the math just, so it's really hard. But, and we are lucky, I think that's what's kind of frustrating too, on this note, that, you know, we are, as Neil said, kind of the optimal school size from Zoe Sanders' graphs. Like we're at 2,000 kids roughly, our buildings get 300 to 700 kids in it. And then when you go to the, you know, even the buildings, like compares to Colchester, Neil brought up as far as their bond, you know, they've got 2,000, it's basically the exact same size district, exact same spending per kid. So I mean, technically, if we were left alone, we didn't have all this, if we didn't have all this uncertainty, we probably could go on for this, move ahead, and be like, let's fix this, let's do what we need to do, because all the bonds just came off in Dresden. It's time to start thinking about the next 20 years, but we can't, because we're just sitting here waiting for like the next bond to drop. So anyways, and I guess that's how we're going into budget season. To your point, is we are just going to stay the course. It's a 3% increase. We might get it even, you know, right? Like that's what we're doing. We're just kind of keeping our rates low and keeping costs as low as we can. So, all right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
What worries me is that people have been waiting for how many years now for the state to decide, and indecision is its own. And maybe that's something you can speak to just politely, that we really need to stop doing things that aren't going to work and start focusing on what we can do, because people can't wait. I mean, I think Sherry Susan, when she was talking about the board education service, she was like, I know you're redistricting, but we actually can't wait now. We have to do that. That's something they need to hear. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you again. All right, on to our meeting here. So now we'll move past, you might think, we'll move on to Brian for our internet upgrades.
Sure. So, hello, everyone. Brian Patton, Director of Educational Technology. As you've heard me speak before, My big push over the last year and a half was to move us toward a resilient, sustainable technology environment. One of the things we've been doing about to understand, what we can afford to maintain. So one of the things we've been doing is making sure, one of the things that gets lost when we're trying to do too much is going back and, at the end of the year, sort of saying, well, what can we close out? What do we not need this year? Who left? And so we get in this technology debt. So one of the things we did is to sort of try and clean up who's on the admin and who's doing this. And one of the things we're like, okay, we'd like to change the password. So that everyone who needs a password will need to get back on. So in very broad brush terms, we have, and everything I'm going to say tonight does not apply to 504 or IEP stuff. So I have a chance to question about that. Someone, that's all. None of that. We're still faced with things. So in very broad terms, we have sort of three areas that we're looking at. One of which is all the machines that we own across the district. The ones that are district owned are given to students and staff. They're about 5,000. Right? So those have a very top secret delivered password that's 25 characters long, not human readable, because we don't want to change that. That's the one that's really, really bad. If we have to change it, we have to bring down all computer and all student machines, which we're going to do. Then we have a sort of a little gray area where it's staff, BYOT, mostly for their phones. There's some that lead us to do that, but we've been trying to recognize that staff is trying to do a lot. So recognizing that the tech team can only sort of push people so fast. So we're like, oh, technically that might be in play, but for now, we're just going to change the password and give it to you. I came last time or something and made sure. We've developed an account system where we have 6 or 7 categories now, starting with full employee, going down to volunteer, or your guests, what they get, we get it. So we're trying to clean all that. So there's that category, and then the final category is guest, which, contrary to what some people believe, is not being taken down. What is taken down is the ability to self. So that's a kind of what you no longer do is show up and just sign up. We're, as most of you know, or you speak about, the issue is that if we have foreign machines on our network that we have no control over the security of, it gets very dangerous. We like our own machines on our own network because we can control their configuration and their security. That's why, and I think it's privilege from my predecessors, why we'd like to get is district-based machines and how we can do that. And I'll revisit that so that we know every machine. So, Bell arrives in New Hampshire and sort of saying, okay, now you need to, kids cannot use any of their personal devices from, starting Bell to ending Bell. One of the things that we can make that happen is to sort of say, you can't connect, there's no Wi-Fi. You have your machine, you have your Chromebook, that's completely connected to anything, but you can't connect your phone or your phone or your own personal computer. A lot of it is focused on high school, and I'll come back to that. You guys have high school kids here, so I'm here tonight. So we sort of gave people a heads up and sort of said, hey, this is happening. And people sort of said, well, what does that mean? After 3 o'clock, what happens when we get it?
Yes.
We have to get in touch. So we're sort of starting to work on that. Now, one of the things that just happened over the last week is we sort of, as I sort of said, we changed the BYOD password so that everyone, like we had to touch certain we call VIPs. So we were sort of saying, well, pessimists will sort of say there's going to be leakage of that just because, as we sort of said, it's a big security breach to say when you use a password on your phone, some phones you can actually see the Wi-Fi. But so people are like, oh. So that's what the BYOD one is like. What it is. So we did that in sort of the optimist sense. We probably had a couple months before leakage becomes significant. The pessimist was probably more weeks. So we had 120 high school at day one would all connect to it. 600 students that would not. So, not doing machines. 1 p.m. of day one of school, we were up to 800.
Yeah, I'm letting it.
So we'll talk about that, but sort of now I have I want to make sure that I use everyone's time. I mean, John sort of slipped me some money to really delay it. And, well, talk about that. So this was, you might imagine, source of great frustration. I mean, we met, we started planning for the next thing that we would do, which is to move all of the faculty and all the VIPs into the guest mode, which has its unique capability of, if we give you a password, login and password combination, and you share it, and that person is using it, you can no longer get on. So there's some, unlike the old one, which is just like you. So we planned over the weekend and we set all that. But late Friday, it came to our attention that the owned machine, top secret, very long, non-human password been breached into the wild. So now we don't know how many of those 800 were your ones or the ones that we hoped would never be shared. So now we have to sort of stop, pause for a moment and kind of go, well, now we can't go ahead with that plan because if we then shut down the BYOD one, that will drive the other, which we don't want safety reasons. So right now, I'm the rest of the parts of the team are reaching out to people to sort of say, how do we solve this problem for real? We've sort of solving it for real. I know hope is not a strategy, but we sort of said, because we believe it's going to be somewhere between tens of thousands of dollars to solve this, or the way that corporations really do, where we give significant. Side note, just in case I forget or run out of time, one of my last asks of this group would be coming to each of the boards is to sort of say, would you consider forming an ad hoc, perhaps one-time technology advisory group from the boards that I could talk to and really get into some of this very deep, like, I think this is the right way to go, but really kind of say, what's the reality of these kind of monies? So that's what we're doing right now. We're going to reach out to them, see what costs come back to you with, like, this is the plan we are. One of the things that happened today is one of the students, so the high school has gone full one-to-one. We're trying to make sure that you're having a unified, you may remember from my previous presentation, we're trying to get K-12 uniformity across, so that we're not trying to split multiple operating systems. We'd like to, so we're trying to get everyone to use Chromebooks. The high school being that's for your last year in the spring, the faculty committee sort of agreed and sort of said, okay, they tried 9 and then 10, well, this year is 11, but they agreed we will now do 12. We are, because of for a variety of reasons, technical and activity issues, exactly what they can. It's safe. That's a more fun. But today, one of the kids turned in their laptop on my personal. So I rang a very large bell with Lauren and Julie and her team, and sort of saying, that means right now. There's some discussion about what is it that the committee has come up with the local SAU policy, but there's a question of like the law itself and the draft sort of said teachers will not be used to enforce this. Teaching not being it's a good point. Like so, so it's like it's a good question. It's open. We're trying, but the general thought is that high school they institute their own ban last year. It's working relatively well. We're just going to go with that. But that's assuming it's just phones. There's, as you guys probably can imagine, the attack vectors through the phones are much, much less than through a computer, like just because they've been designed to that. So that's it just happened a single digit hours ago. We're still working. So it's kind of an evolving situation. I wanted to come and talk to you all.
So sorry, let me just jump in. So I was in policy this morning too, and this came up, and I think we kind of kicked the can down the road just to get it. But I guess my question is what problem are we trying to solve? So we have the bands, let me just like put a scenario. So the band, we have the belts phone. So that seems pretty easy, just kids can't use their cell phones. But then now we have the Wi-Fi issue. And was the Wi-Fi issue basically all the passwords changed to try to enforce the bell-to-bell phone? And then maybe ask a different way is, and again, I mean, not enough to be dangerous, but this actually might be a dumb question, I guess, but you know, let's just take it when you're at a hotel or something. I mean, why can't the high school just have a guest network and then the network that all of our critical systems are on? And that everyone can join the guest network. If the kids want to have their phones on the guest network, doesn't really matter, because they can't use their phone during the day, and at 3 o'clock when school gets released, if they all want to run outside and, or, you know, run into the hallway and check their phones on the Wi-Fi, that's fine. So what am I misunderstanding is
Question one.
Is the guest I mean, is the guest network a security, like, is that more of an issue?
Well, we don't have one that's completely separate from, so creating one would cost money, supporting it would cost money. The message we're getting from you is like, we have no money, and I have other ways to.
So basically, we have right now in high school, and I'm gonna see these high school, it's like, we have one network, Wi-Fi network, and you can't, what we need is.
Right. I mean, so that's the part that we can get down to specifics. Of course, it's doable, right? But, you know, like, the hospital has 150 tech people, right? Hospital budgets are not voted on by the town. McDonald's doesn't have to deal with it.
But we can have two networks, there's not two networks, you have you have the private one, you have a public network.
No, I mean, one
You
of them,
can't do that.
not currently, is it doable?
So that's the
It'll cost
problem,
money.
that's the problem. So what I'm describing as far as, like, our office, like, we have all of us are on our own Wi-Fi, and then we have a /guest.
Right, so
So when people come in, they just sign up for the guest list and password, they don't have access to anything that's in our office. But we don't have, that's like a Comcast, like, network that they,
Sure.
their IT folks have set up.
Right, and as I think I sort of told one of those groups I was talking to, friends of Norwich, friends of Hanover want to contact Comcast, I bet Julie will allow you a plug. And it was like, Saturday never go. But there's a kind of, part of it was, I got calls from my team last year sort of saying, do I have to come in for the party to, you know, make sure it's there? So I went to Jay and said, do we provide support for non-school apps? He said, no. So it was kind of like, oh, now nuance here that's coming out, which is like non-school hours.
Yeah.
My take on it was kind of like 8 to 3 instructional, the bell to bell. It was like school hours. But Julie feels strongly and differently. That's like, no, we have co-curriculums, we have sports, we have theater, we have, those are school hours. So that's a debate that's going on right now. But, you know, we're trying to, I think, as I told you, cut scope. Here's one that I can cut. Now, there's you know, parents feel very strongly. It's, well, wait a minute. I mean, this, I take it. You know, so on and so forth, and I must stay in touch. Okay, let's talk about it. Your kid has their phone. It works 24/7. If you, well, what happens if I need to tell them? I can pick you up. Yeah. If they need to tell you the same, they sort of say, well, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no cell. Cool. I was like, not true. We tested it this afternoon. You go out in the parking lot. Is it good? Did you send it in the past? Absolutely. So I'm kind of like, what's the, I mean, from my perspective, for you guys, you can tell me, but from my perspective, it's like, this is convenience that we offer. We are being told to cut anywhere we can. Putting this back, now that we've done it, I mean, we have to sort of like turn it, come up with a system to turn it on. We can turn it off, we can turn it on. And fundamentally, my understanding is that every parent I've talked to, which is, if we would fix the setting, this would be a non-issue. We wouldn't be getting that because our cell phones would.
I should know that.
Yes.
I'm I've seen where, putting a cell tower on a building can actually be a revenue opportunity for the organization. Because at least it used to be this way, that cell companies want to have towers to be able to provide service. And so like, people who don't go to Hanover High, who drive to the co-op, might be thrilled to be able to use their cell phone between downtown Hanover and the co-op. I would say that the human being on one of these people, often I'm on the phone with my mother, when they're doing it and big calls out. So like one here that's, and if we need money, is that a way that we could solve the problem, which is, I think, people who are visiting the school need to sometimes be, like, I have this problem, I work for myself, I need to be able to access my emails sometimes when I'm in the school district. I'm lucky that I have the VIP password, but if I were not that person, that would be helpful. I think a lot about the after-school things that are happening. I think about not just the kids, I actually also think about the adults. I think if an adult is in the soccer field and they have a heart attack, I don't feel like we have a good way. I mean, I'm just gonna say it, I think it's a liability for the, school district that we don't have a great way of reaching out to emergency help. I could be overreacting, but I'd rather see us be covered than not. So have we thought of looking at a way to say, hey, AT&T or Verizon, like, we'd love to sell you some space on this. And then I would say, I see where Garrett's coming from. I think, if there is a way, maybe what is the number would cost to have the Wi-Fi, I think that would be helpful in helping make a decision. I'm also happy to participate on the TAP committee if it's necessary. I used to oversee FT in my previous role. We have to be involved.
Well, I think, Brian, I think this is a great conversation, obviously, so it doesn't really impact MCS. I think it does help all of us, at least.
Impacts the kids, parents and children.
Parents of kids that are,
But just
it sounds like this is really kind of middle school and high school thing. And I mean, at least from my perspective as chair, I think I'm still a little bit confused, like, what the problem, again, I said, the policy, but what are we trying to solve and what it would cost to actually have a proper gas network that's separate from a security perspective. Our school network, that has all of our sensitive data on it.
We may or may not know, I put money in budget last year for answering that question this year.
Okay, so I guess we need to basically, I think, probably elevate this, because if I was, again, I'm not telling you what to do it, but at least as we got here, it just seems like, again, the kids aren't allowed to use their cell phone. If someone wants to see that, you know, get them Wi-Fi or check their, it's not our problem, right? It's not a teacher's problem, like that's it. But it does seem like, you know, there probably should just be a Wi-Fi. It's available 24/7 in the high school. The kids also put bell down their cell phone. Two things seem to be, and it sounds like it's just a budget issue then, as far as putting this proper technology in place. So,
Wait, you can go ahead and answer, but I do have a question or a point to make.
but I don't want to say more. I think that's like, it sounds like it's probably something else. I think at least that's is more than addressed, and or we probably just need to, when we're going through the budget, to make sure. Maybe you, Robin, can make sure that this kind of, make sure that the budget people, particularly over in the directly on the address that budget. And keep this in mind, because it does sound like this. Okay. Next, you have a question.
I just want to make sure that whatever happens with this, that we don't put the teachers and the staff in the position of being the device police. Because that is a horrible position to be in, and it could take up literally 80% of your teaching time. And so, you know, if there's a technology fix that makes it easy, the device just can't be used because they can't be used, that lets the teachers teach. You know, so I want to make sure that whatever our solution is, that this bell-to-bell ban, I agree with it, but I don't want to turn our teachers into police then, so, thanks.
Yeah. And to maybe sort of wrap this up, I think that there are a couple things around here. I think that the bill developing is a policy initiative that came from the state, which is separate than, if I'm understanding correctly, your concern tacked on to that about hardening our security around our IT infrastructure to make sure that the back thing doesn't happen.
But we did want to attach them as two separate Yes, it means like resetting everything and
And to the extent that previous budget requests have been denied because money was tight, I still encourage you that same, request or whatever you need comes forward, because we're just starting the new budget cycle right now as well too, right? So conversations with Julie and then making sure that those things, come forward to the budget committee and then the full board as we move through these things, and also to understanding what's the opportunity cost of not doing this. I don't know if there are insurance implications, that if we're not hard enough, that our insurance carrier is gonna be like, well, we told you what you needed to do and you chose not to do it. So therefore, uh, so separate those two things. I am perfectly fine sitting on a committee if we really want to spin one of those up. I'll just caution folks that if it's a board level committee, then open meeting law, all of that stuff. And there could be a fair amount of executive session discussion there if we're talking about, security related IT things
Right.
that we're looking to put in place, that we don't want to be.
now, I'm not trying to circumvent a very, very valid democracy process of the meeting law, but I'm happy to meet with individuals, just like.
Well, I also say, but you could have your own IT committee, you could bring in some outside experts that may not necessarily be board members, and I think have similar level discussion. I think the value that you get from the board, not this board, but really the Dresden board is, well, we need a budget for it, or are you gonna be willing to, put the money in the budget in order to fund this thing? Right.
I think maybe to close it down, I would say it's something. Again, it seems like this should almost be something Robin and the administration, again, it seems to me to be what problem you're trying to solve here. And that's why the policy, because the policy is pretty easy, bell cell phone, use your cell phone. I guess, again, I don't want to hide behind because we've been hiding behind this for decades now, well, the teachers can't enforce this, and therefore just that the kids use their cell phone, that's just, in my mind, laziness. It's not in the kids can put their cell phones away. It's like if someone sees that it was working, I guess the question is this a security problem? Why we cut the Wi-Fi? Or we trying to literally keep kids off their devices? Like, no Wi-Fi. What was the answer?
I'm trying to have them only use the Wi-Fi for their school devices.
Okay.
To prevent them from putting their personal devices onto our networks
Because of the bell-to-bell ban or because of security?
because of security.
Okay, so that's okay. I think that's. Yes.
Statement and question. So yes, I work at the high school, but for example, I'm working on the climate action plan. And we're trying to build a community, representation. Okay, so we have a lot of volunteers at the high school. I suspect there's a lot of volunteers in all of our schools. And a lot of times we share documents, and since the security measures we agree with, that's impossible. We can't do any kind of group online meetings because they can't access the system. Our community rep and council can't access anything. So for me, who's trying to build community connections between our schools, our kids and our, the rest of our community, it is a lot more work. It's hard copies, they can't be active members and contributing. I mean, I think about the whole when we were doing, portrait of a graduate and how many community members we had when you're sharing documents. So it's a small problem, but it's actually a big one.
Mhm.
I don't know how to navigate this, but nobody said anything about that.
Right, why is that? Again, why is Linda?
It seems like we gave them sort of like, oh, we'll give them an email address, not thinking about the fact that what does that give them access to? So there's a question of like, what we're trying to do with this sort of bucketing thing is to sort of say, I think it's certainly a policy, it might be law, that we cannot give access to our network. Anyone that hasn't gone through our HR vector training, so we're trying to establish.
But if everyone was on this guest network, which they used to be when it's all work, why can't we do that again?
The guest network,
Because that's what you used to be, right?
You could share Google Docs. I could share with people outside our district. And they could sign on and do work, and they can't now. So I don't know. I haven't talked to Brian or Suzanne or anybody. I just know.
we changed the fact that kids couldn't share Google Forms and stuff because it's a vector for communication with people that we don't want. So there's a reason why.
I would argue that there's a level of detail here that's sort of
Yeah.
technology related that is not going to be solved. And I highly encourage the appropriate parties to get together to work through these issues.
All right, yeah, that sounds, Michael?
Yes, Neil was so successful in almost moving us on. I would add one thing. To the extent it seems in 2025 that the internet is part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it seems that this isn't a one-year thing. You need to figure out from a technology perspective and policy perspective and norms and education perspective how we want to deal with it. I worry about spending a lot of energy to do it a creative and less expensive way, as opposed to finding a single straightforward way to be like, this is how it's gonna work. If there's one way that everybody does it, the impediment is dollars. Let's just have that discussion about the money, because it feels like there are lots of things I want the administration devoting their time on, particularly in education 2025, wrangling the internet. Right, if it, like, let us wrestle with the financial trade-offs.
Yeah.
And like try to figure out what the straight way is. That'd be my advice.
Because Michael, delayed the ending of this discussion, I'll just check it out. So, I work at one of those local institutions that does this, and I will say, don't anticipate that one single solution is going to, get you more than 6 months to a year, and then the next thing pops up.
Yes.
That wasn't there previously, you have to guard against that. So this is a moving target, and we will always have to be vigilant about going out.
Lived through a ransomware attack at a healthcare organization, I'm aware sometimes the old stuff stops working. But I just, you take your best shot. Take your best shot. And for the record, I want to apologize for being late. I did not anticipate that 1.7% of the town of Norwich will be playing youth baseball this fall. And so it just took a while to get off the field. So, thank you.
All right, Brian, that sounds great. I'll close on this with our budget cut in the community. One of the things that we have talked about with Sean.
Policy.
No, I'm just telling you, Brian, that one of the things that we talked about with Sean, as far as we wanted to understand as a board during the budget process, is the federation of technology resources and just the impact here at MCS. I think it might be causing some lack of technology support here, right, Sean? So again, nothing to talk about tonight, but just as far as our budget goes, we just want to make sure that, that we're kind of got the right dollars in there, because I think it was all intended in a good fashion to optimize costs, lower costs, move people around all the buildings.
I have an answer, but I'm hearing that you would like to respond into.
And I don't think we really talk about it tonight. I'm just saying that while you're here, I know this is one of the points that we put as far as to kind of make sure that we understand as the budget process goes through. So
Just to be clear, the cost would be in positions. We talked about adding a couple of positions to our school, so that we would be able to be part of the federation
And be aligned with the other schools in the district.
okay, so that's, and just want to, and I would encourage you and John to get this around, put this budget together so once. That's one of the items that we can break. So while you're here, just want to put that out there.
Sounds good.
And then they do the Wi-Fi network. The phones. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Brian. Always helpful. Again, glad that you're here as well, helping out and making sure that everything's working. All right, we have a policy. We'll move on to our item. Is it B or C now?
It is.
Rebecca, thank you.
She had a thing just in the, went to the
I
end.
did mine, but maybe it did. Anyway, so reading the policy, so this basically is the behavior threat assessment policy that's required by law on October 1st. This is the first reading, it is here. I talked about it with Brianne, she had reviewed it with Sean, the administration here, and he had no issues with it as far as the establishing of procedures. Do we have any comments on this? Sean, do you have any thoughts on this? You're good?
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you give me an example of what would trigger this?
The extreme would be a school shooting.
Okay, I know. So then, yeah. Thank you. saying this is a required policy that we have, and it's supposed to be approved by. Yeah, yeah,
I guess technically we'll do our second reading in September. And then
Yeah.
So we should be good to go.
yeah.
Okay. All right, on to our budget guidelines. I have to apologize that we had our first budget meeting, was it last Tuesday or a week ago Tuesday? It was just last Tuesday, right? So Teresa, myself, Neil, and Sean met. We had a good meeting we review the quick model that we all looked at before. We had done a lot of work on kind of looking through what the quick model had in it, what the CPI rates were. As we know, there's a lot of unknowns there, but the quick model, right, is basically taking projecting out with the step and track. CPI increases for everything else, basically everything except for our labor negotiations, which is, everyone probably knows, we have a teacher contract coming up to be negotiated. The last one, 1 year, this one now is going to be starting this fall, so obviously we cannot really budget for that. So what we recommended was based on and unfortunately I admit that the first thing is a typo, so I can fix that. It's actually supposed to be 627 in the first row. Everything else should read. I do apologize, I didn't get this online until this afternoon about 4 o'clock. So we don't need to approve it tonight necessarily. If people want to give me some comment on it, maybe it helps just to go through what we wrote. I know that would be a good thing as a group right now. No, perhaps let me read this later.
I already read it.
You read it already? Okay. So again, basically paragraphs 1 and 2 are in Neil or others, if you have comments as far as, I hope I got all the acts right in the years that they were done correct with regards to Act 127 and some other things. Basically summarizes what Rebecca just talked about as far as Act 74, which is really page 454, and then Act 127 going in place, is really what's going to be driving some of the unknowns this year. But again, we're pretty much moving ahead with the fact that they've got these committees in place. The one question I have for you, Neil, is we've got the redistricting task force, is the Commission on the Future of Public Education, that's up and running and going too, is that, or is that from a previous bill that's no longer out?
That is still in existence until operational, but its scope and its focus have dramatically decreased.
So should I just remove that from here? As far as, because I looked online, it looks like they're still having or even bi-weekly meetings. And I didn't know if that was.
Yes, but they're no longer looking at sort of the massive reform stuff. I think there's more text, so it's like to the redistricting task force.
Okay.
So there will be some work for that group to do, potentially upon recommendation of the redistricting task force.
Okay. Should I leave referencing? So, again, this year we went through the quick model. As you can tell from the paragraph below, it's in bold on the 3%. Again, exclusive any labor and contract settlements. The quick model is basically producing a assumption or a projection using the July CPI of 2.71, and that's for the total budget. It's pretty close to what the actual school budget would be with, and then basically the projected budget using a CPI increase of 3.2%, which is a little bit more conservative, and it would result in a budget increase of 3.2%. So that's why at our committee last week, we looked through and said, let's just go right down the middle, have a 3% budget increase. Again, I highlight the fact that we're going to be entering a year 1 contract, and then you can see here with items 1 through 4, we did summarize the things that are weighing on us as we are keeping this budget, pretty much flatline. So you've got the tax bills that have been received with the new appraisals. I think, I've heard tax bills go up, I've heard tax bills go down. Obviously it did achieve the objective of getting our CLA close to 100%. The bigger thing, of course, is the implementation of student weights, which happened 3 years ago, and we are going to be hitting the third 5 years. That discount, and Neil, we don't know the discount, right? Because it was 21 cents last year.
Yeah, because it depends on the yield number.
On the yield number. So all that we do know is the the discount will be less than what it was last year, because it's supposed to be coming down every year as we ease into the 5-year, assuming we get through 5 years without another change in the system. Number 3 we talked about here is just the Dresden assessment in Norwich and the fact that, really we've been benefiting from a lower Dresden assessment because of the debt related to the middle school and the high school is really coming off for the building that was done about 20 years ago. And then, of course, the big one, which is what Rebecca was really here talking about, which is the school consolidation and reform, and the reform is in process. And I think I actually wrote pretty much what she said here, is that, because of the redistricting task force, could drastically alter our education funding and governance landscapes. And I mentioned here that there are a number of multiple offerings that could prevent some of the most concerning elements, which is, I think, what Rebecca also said. And the last section is that while we recognize the 3% target we require to sit in the budget, what we have asked both Teresa and Sean to talk to us about in our future budget meetings is the technology support requirements, which we just talked about, to the extent that may or may not need to be added into the budget. And the big one really is the facility needs, because in the quick model, we have about $104,000. So it's called capital expense, but it really is our annual maintenance. And we'd like to make sure that we have our arms around that. And it's the appropriate number. Is it too high? Is it too low? It's flat, exactly flat last year. Is it going to cover the maintenance needs for this year? Because thanks to Jamie and all the team in place before, to be fair, the school's done a pretty good job of continuing to keep up maintenance on an annual basis, aside from our bigger projects that we've had. And then the big one also at the end is we wanted to just make sure that we really understood the infamous Marion Cross roof timeline, because that continues to come up at every budget cycle.
Yeah.
And we kind of kick the can down the road, like, oh, that's a big project. Oh, we don't really know. Then, everyone kind of looks up to make sure that the roof is safe. But I think it would be good for us just to have a little bit more clarity on that as we're going into this budget season. I don't think we're actually going to act on it, but I think it'd be good to get our arms around what really is that. I think Tony probably would just give us more of what really is the state and what really are we talking about here.
Yep. And just understand, and what I guess I'll talk about it in when I do my report.
Okay.
I do mention that.
Okay. So as for tonight, I think we could, if everyone's okay, so one will open for discussion, but I think the action item for tonight, I can make a couple of edits, like I said, to the 25, 26 to 26, 27 in my header. If people want to give me any other edits as well, does anybody else have any edits they'd like to give me? But I think as far as tonight goes, we could actually approve the headline, which is what we're recommending for a recommended budget guideline of 3%. And we could probably do it with, we'll submit the budget guideline to final version. I made a couple of edits this week, or we can wait till next week to find it. So, Michael, any questions, comments, or thoughts?
Yeah, the intention of the document is to set guideposts to guide us. It doesn't lock us into specific things. I don't feel the need to pre-negotiate any position of the budget. I think this board has done an excellent job trying to react to very uncertain situation at the federal and state level. And so I don't see any use in delay. I think it seems like a perfectly fine guidepost to set on the ground.
Okay.
I have a question. It's not related to the guidelines, I'm comfortable with the guidelines. When we were in economic distress times at Adjournment, we did something pretty cool around budgeting. I don't know if we do anything like this, where we asked people to look at, if you had to cut 10%, what would you cut? And then how would you reinvest that money? And I think what that does is it cultivates a really focus towards always taking stock of what might we stop, what do we need to keep doing to maintain, what do we want to stop doing because it no longer serves, so what can we start doing that will help us continue to deliver. And I don't know if we have the capacity or ability to do that, but it's a pretty cool way of budgeting and getting you to look to the future, not just to stay at the.
Okay. Yes, that's a great point. Even last year, the past couple of years, actually, usually had Sean and Teresa, Jamie at that point. At least we So as we got into the final days of the numbers were coming out and the first time, what we could do if we needed to save X, and we did talk about that in our budget meeting, last week, that if we, as we get deeper into budget season, that we could do that. We're at a point now, unfortunately, with the school where it's pretty, there's not much left other than taking, So at that point, I think we decided not to go forward with that recommendation because we did discuss it, but that would kind of just mean at this point, kind of exception. And I think it would make people really nervous.
Yeah, and maybe to clarify, I'm not saying we should plan to cut it, it's more like, is there anything, which there sounds like there really isn't, but it's always, I just do that at home, it's like, what cable channels we're spending on that nobody's watching, we can reinvest it in ones that we will, like, that's all I'm saying, is that it's something new and exciting, and maybe it's, it used to be an interesting budget approach.
And you're right, that was,
It's
it just means that it won't be our
important.
motion.
Yeah.
As we start getting further, because we did that last year, we did that the year before, when we started saying, okay, what's the yield? What's the CLA? What's our student count or ADM? And all of a sudden it's like, gosh, like this means tax rates are our budget's only going up by 2, but tax rates going up by 15%. Like that's the problem. And we get a discount.
Yeah.
Anything else, Michael?
Yeah, we just, there are a lot of similarities between education and healthcare. Including that much the cost of it, is tied up in people, right? I would say that in doing this for my own organization, we've talked about, okay, what could you stop doing? I.e. service line reductions, where I feel like we've had more success that might be relevant for a school district is what services can we share with others? And I know that we had some discussions with other school districts last year about regionalizing certain back office services and being a hub for that. Just because something like that doesn't work once, doesn't mean it can't work in the future. And so it's just another, way to combat status quo bias in budgeting in line with what Gina is talking about. And I think it's, worthwhile, probably more appropriate at the Dresden and SAU level, but, interesting to think about at each of our boards.
Okay, that's great. And Neil, I'm sorry, I just posted this today, I was gonna, but everyone's gonna. Read it and all that, if you want to.
Aside from, I think there are a couple of references to Act 74, there should be 73, but
I was gonna ask you to make sure I was okay with the acts, because I was thinking, which act, when, and who did what in 2000 and last year's. So Taylor, why don't we, take that offline and then we can just post the final with some minor.
so you want to approve it tonight?
I mean, you.
Yeah.
The things that I saw that needed correction were just references to numbers that were resolved by. Okay. Not material to the recommendation.
Could we also approve it?
Yeah, however the chair would like to handle it, I think for the good news, right, to the extent that these budget guidelines are also used by the administration when they're developing the budget, it sounds like there wasn't a whole lot of dissent here tonight, so I think Sean can anticipate that these are the guidelines that will eventually be approved. And so if we just want to wait and do it at the next meeting, that's it.
Actually, why don't we just, change that, why don't you and I get me your edits, because at the end of the day, we're not changing the 3%, we're just changing some of the setting it all up. So I'll fix that this week if the board's okay with it, and give Ryan the final budget guidelines to post, and then we'll be all done, even talk about this. Okay. Next up. One thing at APA. I did not approve the stuff that they said.
That's okay, I did, we're good.
Yes, so Lisa and I have been the current approvers. And it is time to change, right? Sometimes. you
I
have
can't
to-
even remember. I can't remember how long we've been doing it.
I don't like it.
Yeah, we can do it.
It's,
I am due for this round, so.
we're ready to change.
Garrett, I would like to.
So you got Neil taking another one.
I'm happy to do it. Back to you. Yeah.
There you go.
Gina, you know, it's the All right. So this is for our action. I think that we can, go forth with this. We've got our budget guidelines here, we've got our minutes, we've got our approval of expenditures. So do I have a consent motion for B through E?
Move to approve items B through D by consent.
Second.
All those in favor? That is unanimous. All right, moving on, our reports. I will make my one report. Actually, the big update for us really is with regard to everyone's pricing on the listserv. It's been the infamous Norwich Finance Committee. So I think, we're all, again, I just want to be crystal clear from the report, from the chair perspective, we're all very much in support of the Norwich Finance Committee and the work that they're going to do. We just wanted to make sure that it was, put in place properly and that they actually have a charge that everyone agrees on. So they actually have clear directions as far as what they're doing and how they can be helpful. So I did talk with Mary Layton last night, who's the chair of the Norwich Select Board, and suggested that I would send over the previous MOU and the previous charge that was drafted by Neil and Tom. And actually, I was just informed today by a member of the public that we actually had that in a meeting back in 2020. My name was on it as well. But we never signed it because it never went over to the select board. So it never went forward, and that's why the Norwich Finance Committee never moved forward either. I do think that one thing that we will probably edit a little bit after time of Mary, which I do agree with, is I think there is probably some language that we should talk about a bit just with regards to how the Norwich Finance Committee interacts with some of the administration, because the administration's role isn't really to report to the Norwich Finance Committee. The administration's role is really to report to the school board. So it's fine. Again, the way this is going to work is very much like the Hanover Finance Committee. It already works. They have their own meetings. They come to our budget committee meetings. They come to our school board meetings where we're doing the school budgets. We will probably set up at least one meeting where we invite them to it specifically, at least for our budget committee meeting, to answer questions and to help them get through the things that they want. But again, I think the only thing that Mary, I think, was a little bit concerned about me with the town and definitely here at the school board is the Norwich Finance Committee, just like the Hanover Finance Committee, is my understanding is they're not reaching out to Teresa and picking up the phone and saying, I need this, this, and this, and this. I mean, they're basically accessing all the same reports that we are as a school board. So I think that's the one thing that might be a little bit more clarifying thing, which I can work on a bit if Mary and then the select board, want to work on this with us. She said it sounded great. She was going to bring it up at their next select board meeting, which is, I think, September 24th. So I think we, both have the path forward here. And again, it was really just having some input, at least being able to meet with the candidates, which is part of the MOU, and giving them a clear charge, which is the second document. And those are documents that Neil had sent to us last week that are part of the 2020 board notes. And the other resurfaced. Okay, so that's my chair report. It was more of a functional report, but I think you can move on now to Sean's report.
It's approaching 8:15. We grew a little bit. We're up to 325 students. I think up 5 from a couple of weeks ago. Unlike all of the turmoil in education outside of the school, we've been off to a really good start. Our teachers were ready, having 5 days of in-service before the beginning of the year was great to allow us all to come back ready for kids. The kids have come back positive and excited and ready to be here. And we've not sat here tonight, I feel really great about the state of things. Few highlights this year: the outdoor classrooms have been used, or they're planned to be utilized much more. We had a teacher that went through a whole nature-based master's program. She's doing some work with the rest of the staff, and it's quite exciting to have more grade levels thinking about how they can utilize the Norwich nature area and bring that into their curriculum. That's a great thing. We are working on one of the things that as a school we could work on is getting kids here. On time and with attendance wise. So I'm just gonna add to, I'm adding to the who's wise words and to the board reports what our weekly attendance is. And last week we had 99%. So we started out really strong. It does have an impact on kids learning when we have, they have to go for a week, extend a week, or are late 3 or 4 days a week. So we're really working on that. One of our school goals is to see how we can encourage people to show up on time and be present when school is in session. So we've started out really strong, and I think we can only stay strong right now. And the other thing that I would like to highlight is it's really pleased that the school, our city administration came over. Part of opening the doors, welcoming kids, it was really refreshing to have brought them over and spend some time with us. It meant a lot to the staff. And since then, have been over multiple times. We appreciate it. And other than that, if you have questions about my reports, I'm thinking, but
Compliment is, as a parent who happens here, I was like so like envious of the two things in here. One was the community read program. I thought was super cool. I wish I could have done that when I was a parent. And I think it's great that the nature or forest writing is also in the 4th grade. So.
All right, thank you, Sean. Did you just work through your just lost?
37.
That's the principal report. You actually may submit, you get your own report. So we're on the superintendent's report.
Yes, well, we did, I feel like fabulous opening. It was a great week last week, and I actually was able to start here with the Marion Cross teachers the Wednesday before because they came back early, and Sean prepared an amazing breakfast for the staff, and then it was just nice seeing the schedule that they've laid out for the 5 days. It was really well done. I heard a lot of positive feedback about the choices from which teachers were able to choose. So that was really great. And then we had our opening day with the entire staff on Monday. We had our breakfast and I did a little opening speech. And then we had a student panel, which people loved. And we recognized teachers and staff members for their service in 10, 20, and 30 years. So we got a lot of positive feedback. And then Wednesday, it was a culminating experience of bringing all the students back in. And so overall, I just think the week was just so positive. And I've spent already a lot of time in the buildings. I've been in each of the buildings. I've been here multiple times. I think at least almost every day I've been here in this building. So it's a good start to the year. I'm hoping I can keep that up for the remainder of the year, but we'll see as things, start to speed up. But overall, I think really a positive start.
For the climate action plan, she needs an electric bike maybe to get around.
Yeah, that's stuff. I need to
Maybe one of you.
yeah.
Okay.
And a wetsuit for the gloves. It's full.
All right, any questions or comments for Rob? All right, if none, Lauren.
Yes, so I previously submitted my report. Hopefully you'll have a chance to review it. And I'll just give, I think, 2 additions. Since I wrote and uploaded this report, I'm pleased to be able to share that the Best Act 230 grant has been approved. So we can move forward.
Yay!
It's a very wonderful moment for me too, because that was the first grant that I tried and submitted, and to get it approved, I'm like, all right, Rob has been a great mentor, very patient with me, and we're moving now. And then I would just add, that I also really enjoyed starting my day here on Wednesday with Robin and the staff and the students and the families returning. With the special note that somehow we managed to coordinate wonderful blue outfits. Feel
They popped in the picture.
community. I'm happy to answer questions.
I don't have any questions to say,
No.
but.
No.
Very helpful.
It's great.
See everything that's going on here.
It's very exciting.
Thank you very much. All right. And on to Teresa.
I too uploaded my report, just kind of basically highlighting that the business office is still wrapping up, finishing up, tidying up, getting ready for next week's audit. So, and this year they're doing something different, so we're starting with the Norwich audit, and all auditors will concentrate just on Norwich, and then we'll move on to the next district. So it might be a little better, which is kind of nice. We finally, good news, we filled our spot. So, yes. Shannon Butler, she is the administrative assistant, SIU. Forget how we're labeling that, but, so yes, so she started last week, which was fantastic. She's been great to work with. Such a peppy attitude. I mean, very uplifting, which is great. And then, glad to know that this Monday, Janice Starkey is gonna come from RMS and join us as the assistant BA. I'm excited about that. She's been great to work with for the last year, so I just think it's gonna be a really great addition to the office. It's pleasure. Optimistic. Human resources is still wrapping up, loose ends with a lot of the new personnel and everything else. Transportation, to get off for this school, I get off to a little bit rough start at the beginning of the school year just because of the medical situation with the driver, but luckily that driver's doing better and everything else. But other than that, we're hoping again to try to keep an eye on the drop off times and the pickup times. And still working, trying to make sure that we can get a better flow on some of that this year. Our maintenance, I met with Tony and Matt again recently. We're forming the facilities committee, so that'll be off. That we'll be able to, what we'd like to do is get one personnel, it'd be nice if the principals joined us, but at least one designated person from each of the schools to be part of our committee and everything else. And then hopefully, we will have somebody join us from outside the district to get that. So that's just kicking off and we're getting ready going. And that'll really concentrate on what we've said over and over, really clarifying what is capital improvement, what needs to be over here and handled, and then what really is maintenance. And so separating those out, really moving forward on figuring out what we need to do to take action to get roofs fixed and things like that, and keep up with everyday maintenance, issues that need to come up. Food service, it really hasn't changed since the last report, so that's pretty much all set. And then I uploaded the financial reports for the FY 25. These are all unaudited and everything else, but we, right now, between the revenues and expenditures, we're looking at roughly about $50,000 balance.
Nice.
Does sound like we're in good shape then, at least at the moment.
Any concern about the delayed tax bills and revenue coming in?
Nope, and I have been in constant contact with Treasurer Cheryl Lindbergh, but I've also spoke with, I was gonna say the name wrong, Barry. I spoke with her this last week and everything else, and put the bug in the ear that, it would be nice, when they have a meeting on the 10th, if they have received anything or have anything to give, that would be great. Other than that, right now, we have enough funds to, another district, but carry us to the end of September, and everything else. So by then, we should be rolling in the tax. We've been very conscious about what we're paying, and just like payroll is important, but others If they're not here right now, we don't.
Or so now if you received your tax bill, pay it early. Well, thank you, Teresa. Any other questions for Teresa? Super helpful. Nick, sorry, Michael.
Just on that last point, do we have, and pardon, if people have said this before, do we have any lines of credit? Or have we ever done a revenue anticipation loan or any of that, or?
I haven't approached that yet. We were doing everything to avoid that, everything else, which, working with the town, looks like we can avoid anything in that doing. I know in Vermont, you can do a line of credit through the banks and stuff. I've done it at a prior school district when we had tax issues, but, so that's still a backup plan if, they tell me by the 10th when they have their meeting that we're just not gonna be able to loan you anything. So, yeah, so that is.
Okay.
And actually, I was gonna
Not
say a
loan,
question,
but
but, is this more of an issue because of the reassessment of tax bills going up, or is this something, because remember, a couple of years ago, they changed the tax date, so is this gonna be an ongoing thing, or is this just more of this year? I don't remember.
I don't believe it will be an ongoing thing. I do believe, and I think it was just last year, is how I remember it too. And we didn't receive our first payments from them, it was mid-September last year also, just because of when the tax bills went out. So that's probably kind of, and the under, being able to, not spending your whole budget up fully also gives us that surplus of money that we're hanging on to and stuff like that. So, yeah, so, I mean, I can't see if after this, because that's a big task when they do the revaluation, so I imagine rolling forward, unless there's some huge skewing again, you're not gonna be rolling into that. Anytime soon.
All right, any other questions for Teresa? No, okay.
Thank you.
So executive session, do we have a need for that? I don't see anything in the. I'm logging. Anybody? No. Okay, so we don't need, I was all ready to come in, I had my sheet here, Neil, and I had the. We need to, so just so everyone knows, so Neil is correct. There is, so we're going in for contracts and negotiations, we're actually supposed to have two motions, and that's gonna be, and I can help you, everyone out. And then basically things like, if we had, negotiate with real estate, or appointments, or employment, or disciplinary, those are all, we would do one motion and also very clearly state what it's for and the actual number, so. It's not hard, we just have to do it. So, in the future.
I like the lamination.
I was gonna say.
So that every, aside from Gina, all of the rest of you should have received the laminated copy because it came from VSD.
Michael, do you have yours at baseball time?
I had, I'll put that there next.
Is that in the new board member packet?
That was board member appreciation.
Oh, I didn't, yeah.
Yeah, that was-
Not yet. What have you done, Gina?
You get the person that has everything.
Try to later. All right, so again, so that concludes our September meeting. As far as agenda talk to your next meeting, feel free to get me the agenda topics. And at that point, do we have any other comments, questions? No? I do a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn at 8:27.
All those in favor?
So, okay.
Yeah.
We're adjourned at 8:27.
Who won?